what Tony said, not just the monthly donation to the city for the beautification fund, but also the free services to the city properties. I think both of those amount to a tax. I think that is a violation of the Hancock Amendment to the Missouri Constitution. I think it's very problematic. And I think that could lead to somewhere down the line, a lawsuit being filed. And the problem is if the city loses that, it provides for the city paying attorney's fees to the prevailing party. And I'd hate to see that happen when this could be easily fixed. I feel like if you would ask for bids for the sole and specific service of picking up trash from the residential properties that are paying for the pickup, clearly as a fee, not a problem, then you can, we've had some talk, I think Mr. Parr talked about it's hard to examine these contracts apples to apples because they're not apples to apples, but then they would be. And you can look at these contracts. And at that point, I think there could be some valid reasons for going with the higher bid. I think if you go with the higher bid, a record has to be made. I watched the video from the last meeting. I don't feel like that record was made. All it was said was pretty much it's a better deal, and I don't think that covers it. And I think it needs to be specifically why we're going with the higher bid. So I think there are very good reasons it can be explored, but I think if you get the bids, it will lead to the providers giving their best prices without trying to sweeten the deals with donations. We don't even know how much that donation is going to be at this point to the city beautification fund, or free services to the city that the city needs to pay for because that's what the city needs to do. At that point, we can look at that. If there's questions, the council can meet with the providers, ask those questions then. After the motion was made to accept the bid, the representatives from the two companies got up here and there were questions being asked at that point. Why were the questions being asked after the motion was made? Why didn't we know the answers to those questions beforehand? I just feel like there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make sense to me. But the biggest concern I have is this Hancock Amendment violation, and I think that puts the city in a pretty precarious position legally. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mayor, Council, my name's Gary Figgins. I had something else I was going to start off with, but the mayor said something a while ago that just really kind of threw me off. I want to get clarification. You said you met to discuss these bids following the bid opening on November 13th? November 15th, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the following Thursday, was it?
And you said only 3 people showed up to
I
discuss.
think there's only 2 besides.
So how would people show up if they did not know the meeting was taking place?
Well, we discussed it that night, on Tuesday night.
And you set up a date for when you were going to do that?
I believe so.
Y'all talking about the same thing? You were talking about town hall meetings.
No,
Well,
it's
people
after
that
we
show-
opened the meeting, after we opened the bids here, then we sat with the fire department for Thursday to go over and discuss them.
And you went to the fire department to discuss them
That Thursday night.
that Thursday night after the council meeting?
Yeah, so 2 days later.
That no one knew about that. No one in the public knew about. On November 13th, the bids were open. When the bids were open on November 13th, you opened one bid, you read that bid, you opened the other one, you looked at it, and you said, well, we'll pass this around and you can take a look at this and we'll discuss this later. At the end of the November 13th meeting, you had a closed session. In that closed session, did you discuss the bids any? Were the bids discussed in that closed session?
I don't believe so.
Was Mr. Parr involved in that closed session when you met on November 13th? Was Mr. Parr in the room?
Which meeting are you talking about?
This is the November 13th closed meeting after the public session. One of you sitting up there has said that he was.
I've only been to something involving some real estate, but that was it. And that's just a closed meeting.
November 15th, you opened the bids without any discussion whatsoever, you approved this bid. Now, you're saying that perhaps you had that discussion at this meeting on Thursday night that no one knew about, the public knew about anyway. But you had a discussion, Mr. McEwen made the motion to accept the bid, and I thought Mr. McEwen was in charge of the Solid Waste Committee or whatever committee handles that. The committee made no recommendation, but then it was tabled and then it was brought up again for a vote. Without any discussion, there were 2 no votes and all the other votes were yes. At what point did,
There were more than 2 no votes. I wasn't here.
okay, I'm not sure that a councilman who's not here can vote, but maybe they can. But regardless, at what point did you discuss the differences in these bids? Because Mr. McEwen said, well, we get more. More wasn't discussed in the meeting. No one knew what more meant at that time. But apparently you guys did. I went through last night and went through all the videos of the 2022 meetings of the city council. This city council met 21 times last year. Actually 22 if you count the December 12th meeting that you did not want anyone to know about, that I was at. Of those 22 meetings, 20 meetings you went into closed session. I find it difficult to believe that this city has enough closed business, enough reason to go into closed meeting 20 out of 22 times throughout the year. You went into closed session for those 20 times without stating what the cause of the meeting was, what the purpose of the meeting was. Each week you place a little poster out on the bulletin board that states that you will go into closed session for some blanket reasons, which I don't know if that's legal or not. Maybe someone can determine that later. But when you go into closed session, not only are you supposed to state the cause of that meeting, you're also supposed to take a roll call vote. And the mayor pointing at each person, I don't believe constitutes a roll call vote. You've created a mess in this town. And the mess that you have created started when you start having these discussions in closed meeting. You want to be up there and make the decisions. Hey, I've been up there with you. I understand. It's tough to have a discussion out in the open in public. The 4 years I served on this council, I remember going into closed session one time, and that was my very first meeting. At that point, we hired a city clerk.
You never had to hire any police officers,
You
firemen,
do
or
not.
anything like
The
that?
Sunshine Law does not require you to go into closed session to hire people. It allows you to go into closed session. The Sunshine Law does not require you to ever. You don't have to go into closed session to discuss contracts or legal matters. It allows you to do that.
Okay.
We never hired someone
I
in
was
closed
under the
session.
impression when I got on the city council that that's what had to be done.
No.
No,
Well, I was
it's not mandatory,
Okay.
but if you're going to discuss anything, person identifiable, employment information, or their personal identifiable information, it's best to do it in closed session.
But to hire someone to discuss, to determine their salary is public knowledge.
But we don't go into closed session to discuss themselves.
So this council has gone into closed session 20 times out of 22 meetings last year.
Did you know what our turnover rate was in that year?
I don't know.
Because I, like a few of the others, thought that we had to do that in our hiring process needed to be in closed session.
You don't have to do that.
Well, I'm
Can
aware
do
of that, and
You're
I
allowed
have
to
been for
do
about
that.
30 seconds now. But up until that point, we were under the impression that this needed to be done in closed session. Our turnover rate was absolutely absurd in that year.
Furthermore, you don't really understand that a violation of the Sunshine Law is not a violation on your behalf as a city council and as a whole. Individually, you're responsible for that. You're liable for that individually. If you were found guilty of violating the Sunshine Law, whatever fine that would be turned down by a judge would be given to you and would be responsible, you personally would be responsible for paying that fine. Folks, there is no need for you to go in closed session every time this council meets. If you're having a meeting, even calling it an open meeting and not letting the public know about it, it's a closed session. It may not legally be, but it might as well be. You met on November 12th to take action against the Board of Public Works. Your intention was to go into closed session at that meeting. And Mr. McVeigh said you could not. The Board of Public Works had the same opportunity, they chose not to, and you had a discussion. That discussion should have been held at the December 13th meeting. There was no reason to have a meeting on December 12th. You had that meeting because you did not want the public to know what was being discussed. And Mr. McKeon, you even said, it's nice that we can meet in a format like this where we can talk openly. You're not allowed to talk openly in a format like that.
I don't think we're talking about the same thing.
You're required by law to have these discussions in the open.
Wait a
At the
minute,
very least, you're prohibited by law from having them in private.
You're saying that I said that in a closed session meeting?
No, not in the closed session meeting, on the meeting on December 12th, when we met with the Board of Public Works.
Yes.
The Board of Public Works was here, the City Council was here, and me and Mr. Crafton were here.
I wasn't here.
That was,
Steve, you were not here at that.
but that was open session.
It was an open session.
We were never told about that meeting.
No one was told about that meeting. The only reason I knew about that meeting is because I have a habit of going to the post office every day and swinging by City Hall and looking at the poster that's on the bulletin board. I shouldn't have to do that, but I know what this council has been doing over the past year. Conduct business in public. Because if you don't conduct business in public and you keep doing it the way you've been doing it, you're going to find yourselves in some pretty deep trouble. Thank you.
Mr. Peggy, I want to say one thing. I appreciate you coming and saying that. I had the wool pulled over my eyes, I guess, because I did not know, I did not realize. But I will ask more questions from Jerry.
I have not looked at the bulletin board today, but I'd be willing to say that on the agenda tonight is a call for a closed meeting.
But a closed meeting is what the fire chief asked for tonight, so when I know.
The fire chief, you have to give 24 hours notice for a closed meeting, and the fire chief asked for one tonight. That means that you could not have one on his behalf for another 24 hours.
And if you do it one of the first orders of business, you can have it at the end of that.
Stand corrected on that.